spot, a seat, sit up there, table. We're super excited about this. So, and I think we've got more people coming too, so it'll be great to kind of just get started and stragglers can kind of come in. But okay, well, welcome to Clay Club. This is awesome. How many of you are currently using Clay right now? Okay. Okay, how many aren't using Clay right now? Awesome. Of those that are using Clay, question, how many of you are more the intermediate or advanced level if you're currently using Clay? Raise your hand. Nice. Okay, that is awesome. Okay, great, which is great because those who are intermediate or advanced, like if there's questions during the time, like the whole purpose of this event is to be like a genuine like workshop. So if someone here is a great user with Clay and someone has a question, you can answer it right then and there. Like we love that interaction. But okay, cool. So we're super excited about this. I'm going to do a couple introductions, and then we probably will just get started on some of the demos and things like that while we're waiting for pizza. And then we can just pause it, get pizza, come back. But super excited to be here. So my name is Robert Clark. I run a company called Rudiment, and we do a lot of stuff with Clay. We do actually a lot of stuff with content. That's kind of our approach. And then we've got Harris Kenny here, who is, and this keeps going off, but Harris Kenny, he is with Outbound Think. Super excited for him to be here. He just flew all the way in from Denver this morning, and he's got some really cool things that he's going to show today. And then Brandon Charleston with Top of Funnel, founder over at that agency. Basically growth marketing, everything outbound, inbound, and everything in between. And he's a wizard at AI. So, and also when you talk with Brandon, you just feel good. Like you feel good about yourself. So it's awesome. And then Harris is a cool guy. Super excited that he's here. I can't wait for you to learn about the stuff that he's doing with Outbound Sync, especially if you're trying to understand how is outbound data and outbound motions getting pulled back into HubSpot or Salesforce, and how does that flow together. Okay, so our whole thing today is we're going to be doing live demos. I'm super stoked about it. So nothing here is staged or planned. Like we are going to go live because there's a lot of you that are, hey Chrissy, I know you, shout out to Chrissy, good friend of mine. A lot of you are at the beginner level, and so we want to do just live demos of use cases. So kind of how it's going to work is I'll go first. I'm going to kind of just do a basic introduction to Clay, some basic demos, very, very beginner level. Next after me, I'm going to try to do a demo for probably like 15 to 20 minutes. And then we want it to be very question, hey, can you show this again? Or how do you do this? Or what about this use case? And see if we can map it out and play for you. When I'm done, Harris will go, and Harris is going to talk about signals, scoring, other stuff within CRM. And then after Harris, Brandon will dive into some fun things like Clayagent, AI things, and just general use cases to really help your motions in play. So, any questions? Or actually, I do have one question. Oh, yeah, did you have a question? No, cool. I do have one other question. Out of everyone here, how many are you with an agency, marketing or advertising agencies? Okay. How many are SaaS companies? Okay. And then, what other companies do we have here? What other industries outside of marketing and SaaS?
Services.
Services. What kind of services?
Engineering, tech services.
Okay, cool. Any other services?
Consulting, CRM.
Okay, awesome. Cool. All right, well, let's dive into it.
Are there any more legacy businesses out here? Like restaurant, I don't know, plumbers, anything like that? I just talked to a client yesterday that owns a window washing company. He's interested in his client, so. Anybody?
Anybody have a real job?
Yeah.
So affected by tariffs.
Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Just kidding. I have a fake job too.
Yeah.
I am going to be using it for my husband's custom guitar shop, so we'll see.
Sweet.
That's gonna be our
Yes.
that's gonna be our example for the day.
Yes.
That's actually really cool. Okay, sweet. Well, let's dive into it. I'm going to pull up. Okay. Okay, I'm really excited to nerd out. Everyone can see the screen? Perfect. Okay, so for my SaaS companies, actually I see Levi back there. Levi, I think on the formation or the submission, I think you guys are evaluating Zoom info right now, correct?
We have Zoom and we're evaluating Clay.
Okay. Okay. So a question I have for people in the SaaS and advertising is, how are you currently finding your contact information? What platforms are those being done through right now?
Apollo.
Okay, Apollo,
Seamless.
Seamless,
Sales Navigator.
Sales Navigator,
HubSpot.
HubSpot, okay,
Phone Play.
Zoom Info, okay,
Zoom info, Cognizant,
okay,
Playbit Operator, yeah.
cool.
Store leads.
Store leads, who said store leads? Awesome. Okay, so out of those contact database companies, where are you finding, what do you wish you could find extra that you're currently not finding within those?
Complete and accurate and fresh data.
Okay, as in emails, are you thinking, or what do you mean by, because data can be so much, where do you think of by complete and fresh data?
Like when I work with a VP SaaS client, for example, like an HR tech,
Yeah,
and they're looking for their total addressable market, specifically those that are serviceable for them. They're looking for that contact information that lets them define sales territory, so country,
okay,
state, headquarters, address.
okay,
And with that, contacts, which has email, LinkedIn, job title, those are some of the basics. And if I go to Zoom Info, and I say Zoom Info, like this is a list of 100 companies, what do you have for data? It's probably about, at best, 7% complete
okay,
and accurate when I compare it to others like Apollo
yeah,
or LinkedIn Sales Navigator or Lucia. They're all generally about in that same range, 70 to 80% complete
okay,
and accurate.
okay, okay, cool. Let's use that as an example, and let's build a click table.
Okay.
So I'm gonna just go live with this, and so for beginners out there, when you're building your first click table, don't ever feel like it has to be extremely organized, okay? Just, you need to understand how it's gonna flow and how it's gonna enrich, and I'm gonna go over some best practices so you don't spend all your credits and things like that. But at the same time, the more you get in there, you're gonna get the hang of how you want your tables to look and feel. So for the sake of this one, I'm not gonna pull any contact data from like Zoom Info or Apollo, I'm just gonna build a list within Clay. Because for those that are beginners, I want to show that you can still have those capabilities. Okay, so I'm gonna go into my awesome Clay Club table here. Oh, also I built the fun table of everyone that signed up, but that's a different thing. Okay, let's go to a new workbook, and we're gonna find companies. So let's use an example. So let's talk about your ICP. Who are you trying to reach out to? Who are you trying to find?
Okay. So these are companies that are Series B to say Series C, just keep it a narrow range.
Okay.
They do have a person in an HR function. So human resources director, people operations director, VP.
Okay.
They are headquartered in the US
Okay.
and number of employees, let's say it's in the range of 200 to 500, yep.
Okay, cool. We'll go one more extra. And then specific industry. Is it SaaS companies? Is it?
Yeah, typically it's SaaS companies.
Okay, some things I like to do when I'm building a list here. So I've got just some basic stuff here. And those who build lists in Seamless and Apollo and Zoom Info, you're very familiar with this structure. I like to make sure that, hey, like we want it to be, SaaS, include some keywords, SaaS as a service. Maybe we exclude agency, or we exclude marketing, right? You can kind of pick and choose as you know your company, what you want to exclude and what you don't want to exclude. You can get pretty specific as in like individual city and state, which again, if you're using those other platforms, you know how to do that. You can select, these things, which is available in Apollo, Seamless, things like that. But let's go down to number of results. For the sake of this exercise, we're gonna just pump out 100 results here, and let's preview some companies. Okay, sweet. So 50 out of 3,000. So let's go ahead and we're going to import this into a new table. And we have a couple options here. So when we talk about enrichment, right, the first step is you have Apollo, you have Seamless, you have Zoom Info. That's the first step. Now enrichment is how do you find all the other necessary data to make sure you have all the information and power about that company to make either outreach timely and personal or just understanding signals and things like that. So I like to just fully enrich it right there. So we're going to click continue here, and we're going to run 100 rows in this view. And it's going to import all these companies, and then we're going to dive into some fun stuff here. I'll stop there. Any questions about kind of just what we went through? Yeah.
I have more just like a best practice question. So one of his criteria is, hey, they have to have somebody in like an HR environment or seat.
Yeah.
I'm a pretty similar use case where I only want to find companies that have somebody relevant that we can talk to.
Yeah.
So technology leaders, engineering leaders, and stuff like that. But you can't really do that in that first step, am I correct? So it's initially finding that big, long list of stuff, and then you've got to go search for people at that company who fit my ICP persona titles and everything, and then filter your list down that way. Is that correct? Because I feel like that is a very, sometimes it takes quite a bit of time to do
Sure.
those two steps just to get down to your true ICP list.
Right. So I would say
Yeah.
best practice is think of it like almost like a high level, like altitude wise, where you're going to high level, where with Clay you have the opportunity to have a company list of tables and then people list of tables, right? And they introduced workbook like a year ago or so, because before it was just tables and folders and it got really messy. But now it's a lot more organized and streamlined. And so some things that we like to do is have SOPs as far as naming convention, like we'll even put dates on it to make sure that, okay, we scripted this like a year ago, it probably should be refreshed, right? But, well, like with Apollo and Zoom Info, you have the same thing, companies and people. A lot of times we'll just go straight to the person, but then you don't even know if they're actually still at the company, right? So that's where Clay comes into effect is you can actually do fresh scraping. I mean, it's more about web scraping and pulling in the right data from different sources, things like that. You aggregate the data. So to answer your question, it's usually just start high level as far as like location, and then narrowing it down your ICP, having a company table. And the beautiful thing is you can link that, go to a people table, and then finish it out. So what you would want to do then is segment your scoring. Like, is this company even something that I want to dive into? You know what I mean, as far as people. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I just didn't know if there was a way you could do it all in the same step rather than doing them at the same time. Like, in my company filters, I want to search for, I only want to include companies that have this, anyway.
Sure.
Yeah, so it's a really good question. I think that what Clay represents, which is different than the Zoom Info era, which was kind of like the digital version of like Dun and Bradstreet, if you're old like me, which was like my first cold calling list for Dun and Bradstreet in 2009. And with Clay, especially if you're using a system of record like a Salesforce or HubSpot, you may not have to do that every single time where you do the filtering every time.
Yeah.
So like if you go through that filtering step and then you have a list, in the future you can set up signals and triggers where you already know the companies. And now you're just looking for like what's new. So potentially the first go around, but we were talking with Jaron earlier about how like they are now they're actually going upstream to the source. They're going to Indeed to find jobs as like the source of origination instead of saying find me companies, then find me hiring. They're just going right to the people hiring.
Yeah.
And so they don't have to filter it out because it's just pure signal.
Interesting.
So I think like in the beginning and as you get comfortable and as, and I don't want to assume where your organization is at, but just in general, as one goes deeper and deeper and starts to get more familiar with like the upstream signals, you can start to get more efficient and not work through it. But sometimes like working through it at the beginning, especially if you have a new hire, having them do it the old way or the conventional way and then going, so it gets better. It can get more efficient. Brandon can talk about using like MCPs and Claude and Manus to even like build lists from scratch conversationally. So yeah, but like what you're talking about is like definitely like it's kind of annoying and it gets old after you do it a bunch of times in a row. So it's like a fair.
Yeah, no worries.
I think, is pizza here? You guys want to, we can stop right here and just grab some pizza if you guys are hungry and it's lunchtime. Let's just do that if you guys want to grab some pizza real quick. Okay, so let's just do the next step. So I want to continue just keeping this as simple as possible for those that are at the beginning level. So let's just kind of go through our next step here. which we're gonna add enrichment, right? So here's something really cool when you start, I wish this mic had like a thing. Anyway, so when you do want to add something else to your table, which is now I want to find contact information, or I want to make sense of my data, we'll do a couple things here. So, for example, let's say, with location, for example, let's say I don't want New York or NY, I just want San Francisco, okay? I don't want the state California, and maybe because I want to bring that up in an email and say like, hey, we work with a lot of companies in San Francisco, or the Bay Area, right? So there's a couple things we can do here with what's called formula, and this is cool, and it's cool for a few reasons, right? So let me just walk through it, and we can generate a formula here, and we're going to say take the, and let's go here, location, and output the city. Okay, great. Now I've gotten the city, right? And if I want to go one step further, if I'm going to push this into like an email, I probably don't. I probably can either have it lowercase or capitalized depending on what you're trying to pull for that email. But for the sake of this exercise, let's say we want to make sure that we're only pulling the city.
I struggle with this, and I can see right there that your output says Wyoming. I've actually really struggled with this second formula.
Oh yeah, yeah. Great call out. So let's see here. Let's go back here, and I wonder if part of that enrichment process they're not pulling in the state there, or that Wyoming is the state but not the city, or like remote.
May not live in a city of Wyoming.
Yeah, exactly. So question for you though, on that formula, what other things are you trying to do with
So
that?
I'm attempted to even go as far as like AI, with your knowledge of standard address fields.
Yeah.
Make an analysis on this and then output the address accordingly.
Yeah.
I never got it where I want it to be.
Huh. Okay. And when you say address accordingly, like the right exact
Yeah,
number,
like,
street,
this is
everything.
This is city, this is state, and especially with international, so the location to like separate fields has definitely been a struggle for me.
Okay. Let's see if we can go in. Okay. Let's pull up our imported companies and maybe there's something we can pull in here for location. There might be one step further we can do, and let's just test it live for fun, because that would be fun. Enrich. I wonder if there's an enrich address feature or company. There isn't, but I know there is a way where you can find actual free address, right, Harris?
Yes.
Is that within the enrich company
I think
feature?
enrichment. I mean, so, there, here.
So I'll just, like, there's a lot you can do with clay. I think and there are some, like, actual clay masters in this room. I'll call them out when I talk, because I've got them written down, I see them, I see you. The biggest thing about clay is knowing when to stop. So it's like, if you don't need the city, because you don't need it at that level, then just don't do it, right? Now, like, I mean, Robert can do a lot, and he can sit down and hammer away at this. I've seen Robert's clay tables, he's legit. But a real discipline that you'll develop over time is knowing, like, okay, this is good enough, this is getting me 80% of the way there, I'm just gonna like call it and I'm gonna come back later. And I think that like, just because you can do everything doesn't mean you should do everything. And like experimenting with AI, like she was explaining, like you can get Claygen to try things out, then it's gonna hallucinate, and then you have to check it. You know, sometimes it's just like not worth it.
It's just territory information.
If you need the territory information, if that's like super important, then you're gonna have to design a process that allows you to do that, and you're gonna have to think about a way to source a list. So you may say, yeah, find people in clay is great, but territory is standard for us, so that's not how we're gonna source our list, actually.
And have
We're
you
gonna source our list a different way. I'm gonna let you keep going, but that's just kind of like sometimes you have to not
Have
do
you
it.
attempted that with anything? Because I think you said AI, right, or like Claygen?
I
to
tried
scrape
just
that?
both, the formula fields, and I tried Clayton, and I just couldn't get it where it needed to be for basically doing kind of territory level.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes you have to be super strict with it and say like,
Yeah.
in your reply, give me only a city or a state, nothing else, no other sentence, no like, yes, I found the correct state. And if you test it a few times eventually, I've had this.
Even with international, you were been able to get in there?
Like pulling out the city for international, I've looked into US stuff, so that's how I know.
So that's where I've had to default back to ZoomInfo or something like that, because I'm like, I can put it into the
got a question. Is there
Yeah.
like a quick way, let's say, you want to figure out if it's even worth solving, right?
Uh-huh.
We've got Wyoming as an answer there. Is there a way to see, like, or to validate what percentage of your responses are valid, right? If it was like, hey, I know 99% of them are right, I'd probably be like, yeah, I'm not going to waste my time. But if it's like 80%, then that's a problem, right?
Yeah. I'm trying to think through that. Yeah.
So AI is it's a new thing, right? Everybody's heard of AI before, at least everywhere. This is where actually choosing the right model comes into play, and we'll go over this for a little bit just to, I guess, conceptualize AI as it is. But AI is just a brain, right? It's a brain in a room that has no connection to the world. AI agents has tools that can connect to the world and resources, right? And the thing I like to think of it, I actually introduced my dad to AI just a couple days ago. He used ChatGPT, told him to turn on deep research and just start laying it all out there, brain dump, right? Turn on the voice mode because nobody can type faster than they can talk. At least I haven't yet to meet somebody. But I just said just brain dump it. And the biggest thing that he actually said to me, and I thought that was pretty good, but he's like, so RTO. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, role, task, output. You give it the role, tell the AI what you are. Like you're literally cloning yourself, or you're saying, you are a business development rep, or you're a sales development rep. You are an expert email analyzer. You are a LinkedIn profile. You're an expert city analyzer, something like that, right? And use AI to use AI. So use AI to enhance your prompts. So going back to the model, let's say you have ChatGPT, you can bring up something like O3, which is a large reasoning model, where it actually thinks, and before it just gives you a direct output, and just say, I am working with Clay, I'm trying to design a prompt for Claygen to use a smaller model, and this is my task, this is what I want, this is kind of output that I want. These are examples of what I'm looking for, these are not examples of what I'm looking for. Output, we'll go over this in a second, output, what your desired output is, and nothing else, just like you mentioned over there. It'll give you a really good prompt. Typically, I ask for it to output in Markdown and XML with XML tags because AI doesn't have emotion. Well, that's how you can kind of yell at your AI formally, right, is with Markdown and XML tags. So this kind of stuff is really going to enhance your prompt in the engineering aspect of prompt engineering. And when you put it into Claygen, it's going to really, really hunker down. And then if you can narrow down tasks in segments to not feed it everything, do these little bits of tasks like only city or only this, and then you could do another Claygen or another AI to QC the previous AI versus auditing it all in one big step. Does that make sense? So that's what I would do.
Yeah.
Is just really just know the model and the context you're giving it to output that one small task very, very well. So.
Yeah, and I think I can redo it, but I think we found, I guess we found the company address for Wyoming. I don't know what that is, but response negative. But I think we did a pretty good job of finding street address, city, and state. Do you want me to show you how again I did
No,
that,
I
or?
just think that the only frustration then is that it's 2 credits. You know what I mean? I have the data there, it's a little annoying to have
Yes.
another credit to output data.
And I love that.
Other than that, that's it.
Yes, I love that you brought that up because that's what I want to talk about. And so let me just pull up the enrichment that we did here. And so one thing that's really cool, if I just go to edit the column, Clay has this cool feature where you can prompt the prompt. Okay, so if you don't know how to build prompts, just prompt it to build the prompt. And that's what I did there. I just said scrape the website, and if their address is available, pull it. Make sure we have the street, city, state, and zip code. Anyone in this room that knows me knows I'm horrible at spelling, so I made sure that I spell everything correctly, but I'm sure there's an error in there. But anyway, so that is really cool, but you're right? So how does Clay use credits, right? So if we save, if we run all 100 rows, we're going to use 100 credits, right? Depending on your subscription that you have, you're going to have 10,000 credits available, 50,000 credits available, and beyond. So the idea is, when does it make sense to API in to places like Seamless, Apollo, Zoom Info? And that's what I want to express, is that Clay doesn't need to be your source of truth, okay? Clay needs to be, in my opinion, the place where you find all the extra data. And all these other tools you can leverage to plug in and to API in. You just need to understand what subscription you have, right? So it's like, if I use Zoom Info and I just pull a list of all this stuff and I want to import that list into Clay, Now I can do my thing and run an email waterfall effect and all that kind of stuff, which we're going to do next. But that's a really good thing to talk about because, and while building this demo, you can see I only ran 10 rows. Okay, so anytime I build a clay table, I will never run all of it because you're going to waste your credits. So to get it right, unless I'm APIing in somewhere, I'll just test it for 10 credits and make sure I have what I want it to do. Once you build your table to exactly what you want, that table can run evergreen in my opinion. You can always import new leads and it will just run and we'll show that. But let's talk about that, right? So let's do the next enrichment. And I want to make sure we can get to more questions and then jump over to Harris. But let's just, for the sake of this exercise, we want to find contacts. Oops, see, told you I'm bad at spelling. Oh my gosh. Okay, so find contacts at company. I've seen some errors with this when people do this. There's a little bit of confusion. If you want to find contacts with the company within Clay, you can actually save all the results in this table. You don't have to build a new table, which in my opinion, save it in this table because everything's going to flow better. So save results in this table. Okay, and then this is where we can get into the weeds on kind of your ICP. Hey, we want HR leaders. Is it like talent acquisition? Who is it going to be? We're going to pull from the company LinkedIn URL, which it's going to default to that. Or you can pull like the website. I like to use the LinkedIn URL because if it's a SaaS company, they're most likely on LinkedIn and their stuff is accurate. If I go to job titles or if I want to do job keywords, I want to say like HR, specialist or HR. That's HR or I guess let's use an example. What titles would we want to try to find for those people?
So for those people, typically you want to find decision maker and who has the budget. So that's typically a director or VP.
Okay.
Right? So director of HR, human resources director, VP. I've done it by job level.
Yeah.
Which has been okay, especially if you're going with LinkedIn. But then if it's in the job title, you have to put in a good amount of variations. HR,
Yeah.
human resources, people operations.
So that's where
Sure to keep people make sure everyone's happy.
Yep.
Stuff
Yep.
like that.
So on that's where like, hey, seniority levels, VP, director, head, job, title, keywords, HR, human resources, people. If we want to make sure that we can get into the weeds, right? Like, did they just get into the role? How long have they been there? Location. I actually like to do this and just cross-reference and make sure it's United States because it could be a U.S. company, but that HR person could be London or England. And if you want to make sure you want to connect with them in the States, like you could put that in there. So it's just dependent on your company ICP and stuff like that.
If I can throw you a curveball,
Yeah.
How can you make sure like that person isn't fractional?
Yeah, that's a good question.
If they have fractional in their title, you can just exclude that.
We could, and we could show that use
That's an
case.
easy one.
And that brings up when we end the table, I'll show some cool things that we can do. Say, hey, if it matches this, then push it to the campaign for outreach. But let's just say continue to add fields, and we want to make sure we get the name, the first name, last name, URL. Title's going to be important, and you can do as much as you want to do, right? And this is only going to use 1 credit per person, so you're not going to be charged 1 credit for all these things. It's just 1 credit to find that person. Again, there's that conversation of, do I just API into Apollo or Zoom info, or do I just build it in here? So let's just run the 10 rows and see what we can find.
And with it, you did make the comment that you put the company and so the organization data and the people data in the same table. I've kept them separate. You say it runs better to keep it together.
It's what you prefer, but yeah.
So yes, maybe that thing that's very well. But anyway, this is where you really want to take a good look at your workflow and how big like your TAM is, or how big of data you want to do. Each Clay table, we run this in this issue a lot, and Clay hasn't quite solved for it. But just for context, each table you have 50,000 rows capacity. 50,000 rows, 75 columns, 35 of those can be integrations. And everything that you pull into a single cell, like enrichment, is going to be what you call JSON, there's an array and objects of data. For most people, you go to LinkedIn profile, like it's rendered, it's beautiful, as much as it is, but we pull in on the back end of data points, right? So something to consider as you build these tables out, there's things what I like to call under the surface, where you pull in the enrichment and you have all the information. Those don't necessarily need to be brought to the surface as an actual row, because you can reference that under the surface. So when you're trying to pull in people, it might be several titles. You can only pull in one person. Well, if you pull into the same clay table, that's actually going to cost you a credit, versus if you do find people table and run right to the other table as a fresh one. Now you have a fresh canvas of another 50,000 rows that you can scale that much more. These are going to be relational tables where it does a right to table integration, which is free. So you have essentially, best practice, a workbook with a company tab and then a people tab. It automatically writes to that next table of the criteria. That's your source. You can change the source. And then this is something you can do a lot more at scale, and it's free. So that way you have multiple. When you do something like this, typically what we'll use it for is if I'm trying to pull in that coworker or that point of contact inside the same row, so I can pull it into like email copy. Like, hey, is Johnny the best contact for this? You know what I mean? Because it's pulling from another table. So just a little tip there. So try to understand the capacity of your table, that you could hit that row limit or the column limit pretty quickly.
Two questions, one there, and then we'll go to you.
Yeah. Question. So in regards to contact level information and targeting, I don't think I saw there, but geo, is there a way to bring in contact geography information, like city, state? Is it integrating to sales nav to get that, or how is Clay acquiring that contact level information?
Yeah.
Great question. So Clay has all the data and none of the data. They have integrations with third-party providers, right? They switch all the time, and they're always adding more. And so I usually say it's best practice just to, like a Zapier, like just understand what integrations and third-party providers they have. So their Find People table, I'm not quite sure what the actual vendor is. I'm not sure if you know, but I think they use MixRank for a while as their data provider. But these are obviously all public profiles, so that's another thing to consider as well. The data you're pulling in, doesn't matter if it's ZoomInfo, Apollo, Clay. When you're searching for people, your results could vary because of data privacy and all that. So when you're on Sales Navigator and you find the person and you're like, why didn't it not pull into my Clay table? It's probably because it's a private profile that's behind a cookie, whereas these are public profiles. So to answer your question, when you populate a list, it's worth checking what your source is. So if you were to do a Sales Nav source, you're probably going to get more information. You can pull that in. And so that's kind of the difference there. Is that your question?
Yes, and follow up to that is, with Clay, is there a way to use AI to then connect the contact level information to then like a nearest office location company information that can then integrate with Sendoso? Austin, looking at you. Is that something that we could do with AI?
Yes. So that goes into linear binary logic, like Boolean, and then fuzzy logic. So given the scenario, you use AI to pull in the right tools, aka like Google Maps or a search, right? To find, okay, this person's in Utah. Are there any offices or anything like that? So you would pull in a Clay agent or an AI agent with the right tools to do the research. No different than what you would do manually. You would use external tools and reason with your own thoughts to be like, oh, this person's local. So you're applying AI to put those things together. That make sense?
Yep.
And then there was a question over here.
Yeah, this might be a dumb question, but
There are no dumb questions.
okay, then it's not. Thank you.
Yeah.
As you're describing kind of the connection between if we have a company table and a contact table, does that? What I'm curious about is the relationship of one-to-one versus one-to-many. So if I have a separate table, that makes it easier for me to do one-to-many, right?
Yes, exactly. Yep, you only get one person on the one, but if it's per row. And the row is all contextual, it goes row by row. Think of it like zaps. They're all interconnected. Not yet, but Clay doesn't have actual inter-row, that's right, context. None of them do. They're row by row. So if you're going one to many, and you want to reach out to many people at one company, it's best to do another table.
One freebie, I don't know, because I think with this table, obviously live demo, right? So you're gonna run into hiccups if we do it live, but this is actually really fun. But finding HR, that stuff like that, I think, are you leveraging a lot of like Sales Navigator too, or is it mainly just Zoom Info? Are you finding contact data on Sales Navigator too? Is it a primary source?
The sales team uses Sales Navigator a lot.
Yeah, yeah,
And but me being specific and not general is, yeah, the sales team does do an outbound motion. They use Sales Navigator to find those target accounts, pull them in, and then do outbound. They use tools like Gong,
Yep.
Unified GTM, RBV
yep,
to
sure.
look for those intensive.
Yep, awesome, which we're gonna talk about that here pretty soon. But one thing that I've found that's been awesome, if you're doing a lot of prospecting from Sales Navigator, is Prospeo. If you have heard of that tool, but you could actually export an entire Sales Navigator list, which is kind of hard to do that without a tool, so that Chrome extension can do that. So if you're trying to find specific people, like headcount, like HR, exporting that list from Prospeo and then importing it to Clay and then doing what you need to do to find all that data might be a really good step there. Yeah.
So when it comes to Sales Navigator or LinkedIn, right, there's always that what works, like today, or might be shut down. Believe it or not, back in the day, Clay had their own Sales Navigator scraper, and I'm like, there's no way, it's too damn good. But when you have a Clay, or a Sales Navigator subscription, right, you're in your own cookie session. They have their own parameters on how you can actually get the data and export it, whether it's a native integration or a third-party scraper, or you're using Applify or Phantom Buster, all these things. Anybody heard of those, right? That's where, like, how do I get the data, right? You need the juice and get into Clay so you can start doing all the things, right? Scope your data. So I would just say be cautious when and know if you're actually using your own cookie to scrape data, because you can use your own cookie with like HeyReach or other ones where they actually prompt you to use your own cookie. I found the threshold to be safe around 2,500 per day, no more. So leverage other accounts, if you will. If you have a team, try to like hack it away of like 2 people. Okay, that's 5,000, right? To stay under the radar so you don't get yourself into trouble. If you're using Prospeo or third-party ones where you don't have your cookie, keep those close. Keep them like your secret sauce in your kitchen kind of thing, because the more unpopular, the better it is usually. Usually when they go to scale, there's usually stuff that where LinkedIn's like, oh, we don't want these scrapers, right? But that's really kind of how you hack around it. So.
Cool. Well, let's wrap up this table real quick so that way we can move on to some of our other demos that we have. But the next step that I would do in this table for those that are new to Clay, if I want to find work emails, let's say like, maybe I don't have Apollo or Seamless or things like that, but I need to find data, or maybe I only have Seamless. I love using the waterfall effect. And so what this does, and it's going to use credits, and this is where, a good example, you can decide if you have these databases, you could either API in with your key, or you could use credits. So Clay is going to charge you roughly around 2 credits per row, but this is cool because what it's going to do is, if we say run for 10 rows, oops, get name, people, domain. We can have a bounce check here, but essentially we've got this running, and what it's going to do is it's going to go from provider to provider. So if it can't find the work email from Lead Magic, which honestly I use Lead Magic all the time and it crushes, it's just preference, it'll go to the next one. If not, it'll go to the next one until you can find that email. Because think about Apollo, ZoomInfo, Seamless. ZoomInfo might have the email, or maybe Seamless has the email, right? So pulling from multiple sources to actually find that end result, which is the email, and then you could do a one step further and say, hey, even though it did it in the waterfall, you could run a bounce check on it. So that way if you're in a cold email, it doesn't bounce, right? And so validate email, let's just say it. Cool, I just want to make sure it's valid, and run those 10 rows. And I'll show you one more step and then we'll close off. So this is valid, right? So let's say my final step is I've built my table, right? If I'm someone that is a beginner to Clay and I'm wanting to start pushing out some outbound motions, depending on what software you're using, Instantly or Smartly, you can direct into those. So if we say Instantly, and we want to add that lead to the campaign, we would add it there, and if it refreshes. Okay, we've got all this information, and then we can create custom variables, right? So let's say I want to specifically talk about the company or like the address, right? I could say company address, right? And I'd pull that in, and let's see if I said just location, right? So now if I build that variable in my instantly and I want to say like, hey, if you do some more in-depth research, which is kind of more intermediate or advanced, if you say like, you outreach and you say, hey, I'm going to be in your area. I noticed there's a cool restaurant near your location at this. Want to meet up for lunch? You could do that if that's possible. The other thing I like to do is when you start running these enrichments and find like especially valid email address, my biggest go-to is I love using this feature of only run if, and it's pretty simple. I just say only run if the status is valid. I generate that formula. Any email address that, even though the database said it was valid and it was verified, or sorry, it said it was verified, what we don't know, and we can find that out in the next step, is are they using Microsoft, are they Gmail? I tend to see a lot of Microsoft email accounts have a high risk of bounce. So what I can do there is say I only want the emails that are valid to go into that campaign. And output is correct, and then I would save that, run those 10 rows, and it would push it to that campaign. So the reason for this demo at such a very entry level to Clay is once you get your table right exactly what you want it to be, you can just upload those contacts and the table will just run automatically. It's cute, right? So you don't have to do that step anymore. It's like, hey, this campaign is already working. Let's put more stuff in there. And then everything that you've built where it was researching the website, agent, all that stuff is all going to push into your campaign. To show you just an example before we close, here is an awesome table that we built for a client. They do offshore staffing for marketing agencies. So we built this awesome table, and what we did, just to show you, because again, a demo is a demo, right? And you're going to run into errors while you're doing the demo. But for this one, what we did is we found the companies, and then we know we're going after marketing agencies. But all marketing agencies here know that there are PPC agencies, Amazon agencies, there's SEO agencies. So we pushed a Clay agent to say, scrape the data and tell me exactly what type of agency they are. They digital marketing, they e-commerce marketing. And here's another like example if you mess up and if you're wanting to push it into an email and you want this to be lowercase in the email, you can just use the formula tab and say, hey, make this lowercase. Property management, we can just weed that out with the only run if, right? But then what we did is we said, okay, now that we have the agency type, let's scan the type, scan the website, and tell me 3 specific tasks that an offshore employee could help with for this company. And it did that. So if we look at email marketing, that person can help with email template creation, list building, campaign automation, and we found all those people, we enriched it, we had the bounce, and we pushed in the campaign. And so if you look at the campaign, all those variables which are here, everyone gets a different email at scale, which is fun. Because if you think about cold emailing, a big piece is deliverability. So even making sure that the copy is going to be different over time is important. So that's our variables. And in the body we said, hey, we help marketing agencies with X, Y, and Z. I noticed you specialize in PPC. I've got an awesome candidate that can help with these 3 tasks. Boom, 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 boom. And so it listed those, and so now every email is different. So that's where Clay can get really fun. It doesn't have to be a one-size-that-fits-all. You can get really creative. The next step is creating awesome APIs and stuff like that. But I'm going to end there. That's just for the beginner demo portion. I want to make sure we can move on. Any questions, though, before we do that?
That was good.
Cool.
Thanks.
Okay, hello everyone, good afternoon. Thanks for coming out, appreciate it. Did anyone come further than Denver? There was a sound, San Francisco, right? Bay Area. Okay, so that's dedication. Okay. Great applause, San Francisco play. All right, you might be wondering what you're looking at. I'll explain in a minute. You can blame my sister. So we talked about a lot of really cool plays, and we're going to talk about more today, but what I want you to think about now as we kind of think about building planks of a go-to-market motion is what kind of gift are you giving to your team, maybe to your successor after you get promoted. 2 weeks ago, my sister sent a video message to my 4.5-year-old daughter telling her that there were fairies in their neighborhood in Studio City. And then she mailed me from Amazon gold coins to leave in her yard from the fairies. So now, every day, for this entire summer, I need to find trinkets and charms to leave in my yard from the fairies for our 4.5-year-old. So 30-second video for my sister. It's going to cost me basically like 120 days of fairy gifts. So just really think carefully before you bake some like little play into your CRM or into some like essential motion. Think about like, we're testing and then does this scale? What if this actually works? What are we going to do with it moving forward? Are we going to be going to Michael's every 2 weeks for 4 months? Don't be that. So I love my sister, but I love the fairies. I mean, honestly, it's worth it, but like, anyway, it's a lot of charms.
They're real.
The fairies are real. I mean, to be fair, I added the lights. Because I'm like, well, if we're going to do it, let's give them lights. But anyway, so watch out what you're giving. Because when you build something out and it works, it might really work and you might be stuck with it. So you want to think about scale. So what I'm going to talk about is how do we adopt motions that work with our system of record so that we're not maintaining, manually updating, manually scraping lists, manually adding filters, kind of in perpetuity because of that like one big deal that we closed 6 months ago, but we forgot about like how to build it so that it was like a little bit less of a pain. So Clay has this new feature called Signals. This gives you the ability to track a number of different ways of getting new information, dynamic information from existing company or contact lists. I'm going to show you an example of an actual, like, this is a little prepared, unlike Robert, because I'm using actual live production data. I've been working on this table for about 9 months as Clay has improved this feature. So I'm sorry, this is not going to be a super live demo, but it is like a real production workflow that has generated revenue for us, and so hopefully that makes up for the lack of doing it live. But there's a lot of different examples of signals, and I heard some really good conversations earlier. I want to put Jaron on the spot again. Like you were talking about some really interesting signals of, like, so when we think about a signal, like what is a signal? How would we define that? And what does it mean to turn Clay from a static set of databases into a dynamic or live set of signals? So we can monitor things over and over and over and over again. So we can look for changes over time. And the way that Clay's job tracking change works is that it uses the LinkedIn profile and it checks that LinkedIn profile repeatedly. And as there's a change to that LinkedIn profile, it allows you to basically set up the workflow. And my focus again is, we're going to talk about this later, but how do we get this data to phone home? We want to go back to the CRM. We want to use the CRM, a system of record, for long-term tracking and long-term attribution, long-term performance. That is the difference between like testing a play and really scaling your go-to-market team. And there's like some pretty big companies in this room, and so I know that there are people who are thinking about it in these terms. So if you have to think about something, think about this. Okay, we're phoning home. This is E.T. You may not know that his actual character's name is Zrek. Okay, so this is your fun fact. They were going to make a prequel about Zrek. They didn't make it, but that's his name. Z-R-E-K. Okay, so now you know, next time it comes up at a party, his name is not E.T. Okay? You're not going to find that any other Clay talk in the world besides this one. Okay? You're welcome. You get what you pay for, okay? This event's free, right? Yeah, so you get what you pay for. All right, so we're going to look at signals, okay? So in this case, this is a live table, and you can see in the corner, production, OS. This is our production, Outbound Sync production HubSpot account. I've got a list here of contacts, and I only want to track if they have a job change if a few things are true. So first, I want to have their LinkedIn profile because that's the piece of information I need to know. That's what we're going to check. And I don't want to track job changes for anybody in the system, only for people who moved forward in our pipeline. So MQL, SQL, partner, basically if they move forward in the process. And if they have jobs change monitoring enabled. That's like a weird little thing, we don't have to get into the details of that. But it's like a little quality control to make sure I'm managing how many people we're monitoring. And so we've got this list, it's originated in HubSpot. You can originate, we integrate with HubSpot and Salesforce. Clay has additional CRM integrations beyond that. But ideally, these important people are in your system, and that's the source. So in this case, we're not pulling from ZoomInfo. We're not using one of Clay's database providers. We're actually using your own CRM as the source, and then that is going to get pulled into Clay as a table. And so these are all the actual companies. I blurred some stuff because privacy, whatever. But you can see these are the HubSpot IDs, and then you can find the associations. Clay has a really deep integration with these CRMs, so if you need to clean up your data, which, spoiler alert, you're going to need to do that, you're going to be able to clean it up a little bit as you roll out a play like this. And then the way Clay's signal tracker work is it's a cron job. It's essentially like a repeat call over and over again, and you can set the frequency with which that check is running. The more frequently you're checking, the more credits you're using. But also, like, it can be like overly sensitive. You know, I don't need to contact someone within 24 hours if they change jobs. That's not that important. A week is fine, even a month is probably okay. It depends on what you do. So you can see it's basically like rerunning over and over and over again, checking that list of LinkedIn profiles from the first table. And so to give you a sense of, like, you know, who doesn't like flowcharts, how exactly this is working. So we've got the LinkedIn profile here, and we have, what Clay is doing is it's pulling that enrichment data for when they started their job, but then if there's a change, there's a difference between their jobs, between the two times that it checked. It's getting the new start date, the new company name, the new company URL, and the new company domain. And then we're checking, basically, and if we find that there is a difference, what we're going to do is we're pushing it to this new table, and I'm going to walk through exactly how this table works. But what I want you to think about is when we find something interesting with a signal in Clay, what is our system of action? What is the place that we are taking action with this new information? Like the most minimum viable version of this would be like a Slack message, right? Okay, I get a ping in Slack, I go take action on it. But what I'm going to show you is that we can actually use the lead object in HubSpot, for example. If you're using Salesforce, same thing. Although probably not a good fit for the lead object in Salesforce, but maybe as a way to keep track of what happened over time. And so just to kind of drill down into this, we have a person. I'm going to give you an example of a specific person. His name is Ron. He's real. He really changed jobs. He's also a really great guy. We worked with him at a previous company. He changed jobs. We now have the opportunity to work with him at his new company, supporting them. And so let's just talk about this as Ron. Okay? So Ron changed jobs. And so what we're doing is we're doing a few things here. We want to go look up the original contact. And we're going to update it now with this new information, because Ron now has a new title, a new company, some new things about him. And then we're going to create a task, and we're going to associate that task with the contact. And we're going to create a new link. So all of these are like individual steps that are leaving like a trail, basically, of what happened. Yes?
Sorry, so real quick.
Please.
That update contact column, like,
yes.
It's essentially like it's telling Clay to go back to HubSpot and update.
Correct. Right. Yeah. It's a really good question. Right.
Can you swap us to like have it create a new contact?
Yes.
You'd rather do that?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, definitely. You can definitely create new ones for sure, or update for sure. Yeah. And like new contacts are tricky, especially like we have some people that we work with who have like multiple jobs, like they have an agency, but they also have a job, and we work with them in both. So like sometimes it makes sense to have two contact records for the same person.
Yeah.
But
each of those columns you can do like Clay automation.
Correct. Yeah, so you can do anything within these columns, right? And now these are some kind of weird ones, right? So these are actually API calls. So I created a connected app to do some of these, because Clay actually doesn't support creating tasks through its HubSpot integration, but I do use tasks, and I like tasks. So I made a connected app, and with ChatGPT or Claude, you can make your own custom API calls to do some special things, like creating a task and associating the task. Yeah, it's a really good question. You can do lots of different things with this. You can make new ones for sure. And so then, like, if you're a sales manager, like, you want this, right? Like, I don't want an ephemeral channel that's being ignored by someone on my team. I want to be able to go back and see, are we following up with these people who changed job or not? And the reason why I'm starting with job tracking is because, like, there's literally entire companies built around tracking the signal. User gems is obviously like the grown-up version of this clay table. Now, I've been able to build this. I don't have to sign a contract with user gems. If I really like it, I would sign up for user gems because it's a really good tool. And this problem is like way more complicated than I'm currently able to solve it. But this is good enough, like go out, make some money, then take that money and maybe upgrade the motion down the road. So I think when you think about signal tracking and triggers and clay, that is the role. It is not going to be the best at everything, but you can do a version of everything. And then as it works, you can reward that play with potentially better tooling, more time, more resources over time. All right, before I jump away from this table, does anybody want to talk about anything like specific? Oh, one thing I'll talk about that's kind of interesting, but not really, but kind of, is you know, you run into weird problems where if you want to do custom things like creating a task, you need to have a timestamp for HubSpot. But like, how do I know what time it is in a clay table? There's actually no way of knowing. And so I found this really cool thing called World Time API. And then it stopped working. So my clay table stopped working. So then I realized, okay, hold on. I've actually got a date time field earlier upstream in my table, but it's not the format that HubSpot wants. Timestamps are really annoying, actually. So I need it to be like a very specific way, down to like 4 sub-decimal points, and it has to be UTC, and da-da-da-da. And so that's where I'm using AI, actually, to clean up these timestamps from an earlier column, and it's working great. And I'm actually really overpaying for this, because I never want this API call to fail. So I'm using ChatGPT 01, which is like a reasoning model. It costs 6 credits to get this correct. But I don't care. I have a lot of credits. Don't be cheap. If you have to spend money, if your ACV is high enough, it doesn't matter. Like, this is the place where you're testing and where you're getting what Clay calls GTM alpha. Like, if you're worrying about a couple credits here or there, respectfully, I think you're focusing on the wrong thing. Like, we're a 3-person company, but growth is the most important thing. You know, if we're not growing, we're dying. So it's like, I am happy to spend money in certain areas. Job tracking signal is definitely one of them, right? Yes?
Question, when you go from testing to
Yes.
full scale,
Yes.
do you have any tips or tricks on how to estimate what that credit usage and things is going to actually look like when you're going from little to big?
Yeah, totally. So, yeah, hey, this is working. Like, what if it works? What happens? Clay gives you, and they've been making this better, more tooling around understanding how many credits different tables and workflow actions are using, and workspaces are utilizing. And I would say, get in touch with the person at Clay, and like you can even have them work through that with you. Just like hit up the support. Sorry, like I love AI, but for support I don't love it sometimes. I would say like just like get yourself to a person and be like, hey, like you just like help me understand the mechanics of this. Like where are these credits going? And they will do it, and they have some exceptional people on their team.
Crazy when you get like a 500,000 record database. What is it?
Yeah, totally. Brandon is really good at this stuff, and then I want to get back to you, but Brandon, I want to.
So on cost, yeah, there's the balance of credits. So it's like a bank account, right? You got a lot for it, and you want to, if you use an integration, you want to know the parameters around how much that costs, frequency. Sometimes it might make sense to do API integrations to get your own because it's a lot cheaper, like tokens, for example, with AI. But they actually rolled out, I don't know if it's in beta still, but there's actually a section now where you can see like P&L, pretty much. I mean, it's credit consumption, so you can audit things there to know even who. And you have teams, who's using the credits, who's stable, to tell them to tighten up on the credits kind of thing. You can see. And you can modify. You can scale it, but you can also modify it. If you know you're testing something and you're using a Clay credit, if you're like, this integration is actually really good, or I want to use a beef here model to actually do the job, you may want to switch to an API, you can do that.
Quick there, yeah. And then we'll get to you.
I was just going to say something to kind of address the thing around
Please.
how to maybe avoid the AI.
Yeah, this guy's a pipe hitter, listen up.
But in your case too, and this would apply to everybody, but join the Slack channel.
I'm in the Slack, yeah,
Okay.
I love the Slack channel.
So, and anybody else who's not, go and join, but if you have a question like this, like estimating.
I didn't realize that, I guess that I could get that estimation from Clay, that's really
There's
dumb.
all these different channels, like community, but people post their ideas all the time, and
Love the
usually get a
tutorials.
pretty good answer.
Does not cost any credits to join the Clay Slack.
Yeah.
Why do you have a task on this?
Oh yeah, so to tell me to follow up, right? So that's like I like to use tasks as like a make sure I do this. That's a great question. To make sure I do this thing. And so if I don't do it right away.
So you don't have an action around it. So you're just like.
So the task is the action to me. It's a manual.
Got
Yeah, because I want to look into it. Like, is it right? Did Ron really change jobs? Did he just get a promotion? These are people who are really important to me. They've advanced in the pipeline, existing customers or partners. So I'm delicate with these. Yeah, it's a good question.
The endpoint is a task for you.
Correct. That is the final action item for me is update a record and then a task and a lead.
And a lead.
And a lead, yeah, in HubSpot. Yeah, good question.
And then do you take that task back into this?
Then from there I just manage it in HubSpot. So when it's done, I check the task off and like I don't look at this table again really. I actually don't look at this table ever. I work in HubSpot and this runs in the background and it's pushing HubSpot. That's my system of action. Yeah, really good questions. Yeah.
Is the date so that you can create the task?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is it just, is it the date that you want the task done, or just the date you just need something to stamp to say today?
Yeah, either, right? So yeah, you can have like when's the task due, and you can set that in the forward a little bit, but literally it's just an API requirement to create a task. HubSpot needs a date timestamp.
Have you thought about just stamping in HubSpot and bringing that over? But so you could just stamp it updates every day?
Oh, sure. Yeah, you could call that. Yeah, you could call that in HubSpot. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there's definitely better ways to do this. Yeah, for sure. I mean, this is basically telling me the time that the job change occurs, but there's definitely better ways to do this. So everybody else is raising their hand. Yes.
Yeah. I know this question isn't dumb because there are no dumb questions, but
what? Depends.
So the way that this starts, oh, it's a new presenter.
Yeah. Robert's gone. Robert's gone, and this is no gentle parenting on this stage.
So did I understand right that the job change trigger, HubSpot is looking for that, not Clay?
Clay is looking for that.
Okay, so.
Well, good question. Dang it, you're right. It is a good question.
Here, like LinkedIn profile, right? All this stuff is happening in HubSpot, right?
This is the source. So HubSpot is telling Clay who to look for. As I land new customers, they meet this new criteria, and they get pushed to this Clay table. So Clay's saying, "Hey, I'm ready to look. Who am I looking for?" So this is the initial.
People from HubSpot, Clay's watching for jobs.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
And then when it finds it, it triggers the flow to create a task for you to follow up.
Correct.
Okay.
When it finds that there's been a change. So Ron is here, Ron is sitting on this list, he's sitting on this list, Clay knows it's checking Ron over and over and over and over and over again because it was in HubSpot originally. Then when Clay finds that change, then this runs.
Okay, so dumb question about this. So in HubSpot, does it matter if that's running on my marketing contacts or not?
No, it can be a non-marketing contact. Yep, that's a good question. Yeah, yes.
On average, it's kind of two-part. On average, how often are you checking for the job change? Like how?
This is once a week.
Once a week?
Yeah.
And then what is like average cost, I don't know, for this to run?
Let's see if I can find that somewhere.
I don't know, say like per 10,000 contacts or something, per 500 contacts, whatever, like what's the average cost of this to run?
Yeah, I don't know because this is so important. I don't care. I'll find this and get back to you. When I can poke around and not worry about unblurring. I will answer that question because I can get it.
Maybe if it's like average of 500 contacts, which could be scaled for little or bigger.
Yeah, I can give you the exact number when I don't worry about blurring. And I can tell you, like, if I'm, this company that is tracking like 10,000 people, shouldn't be doing that in Clay, right? But if you're not doing any job tracking at all and you're a big company, pick some maniac on your team who loves shipping stuff and say, hey, you're going to test this out. And if it works, we're going to get a discovery call with user gens. So like, there's a point at which Clay would say themselves, I would say, they don't, you can grow out of it for some things, and then they want you to go find the next one, the next one, the next one, the next one. Yes.
Sorry, it's more just piggybacking off this question.
Yeah.
You got that custom field in HubSpot that says monitoring yes. That's your trigger to get into this table.
That's one of the criteria, yeah.
And you're manually adjusting that?
I have some, the reason why I have that is, there are situations when people change jobs, but I want to keep watching them, and then there's sometimes contacts I have in my database where they met the criteria, but actually I don't want to monitor them anymore.
Yeah.
So I turn it off.
Okay.
So like, we have a customer who closes, someone from accounts receivable got added to the deal somehow, and then they've changed jobs. Like, I'm really happy for them, of course, congratulations, but like, they're not my customer.
Sure.
So I wasted a credit seeing that they got promoted to accounts receivable clerk 3 at a new company, and I'm not going to watch them anymore because, so that's why that's there.
When you update your HubSpot record, it's more just a HubSpot question, but curious, are you updating associated objects like company, et cetera, with that?
Yeah, personally, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I like to clean that record up and have their new company be their associated primary company.
And then relabel old companies? Or
remove
just
the old
remove
one,
it?
yeah.
Remove it.
That's how I do it.
Yeah, okay, curious.
Yeah. I don't love this part of HubSpot's data model, frankly. I don't like association labels. We're actually looking at potentially using Salesforce internally for some of this stuff.
Yeah, okay, cool.
But I mean, HubSpot's great, but there's just certain things where it's like we have a really weirdly complicated way that we go to market with partners. Most of our business is actually through agencies because this stuff is really hard, and so agencies tend to do it well, and so we have weird nested hierarchies that are hard to manage with association labels. But yeah, those are all really good questions. All right, I'm gonna zip through here because I'm at time. Okay, so Ron changed jobs. Congratulations, Ron. I don't know what's going on with the blanket billboards out here, but I want to send him a blanket. If anybody can explain that to me after, there's a lot of blanket billboards that I saw in the 30 minutes between the airport and Lehi. But congratulations, Ron. Where cozy meets classy. If there's not a lot of Mickey Couture fans in here, I apologize. I could have gone the other one, the L one. What's that? That one. Could have gone Lola. Apologies if you're a Mickey crowd. But so congrats, Ron, through Sendoso. I'm going to send Ron a blanket. Okay, it's like, okay, great. Send him a blanket or send him some crumble cookies, whatever. And the last thing I just wanted to kind of tie it all in here is that we want to reach out to these people. We're going to do follow-up. We want to make sure that follow-up is landing back. Again, phoning home. Think of Zrek. Okay, don't forget that. It's really important you remember ET's name is Zrek. Phone home. Get that data back. So this is the problem that our product actually solves. We integrate sequencers with HubSpot and Salesforce. Clay themselves are in beta. They have an email sequencer. Under the hood, it's Smartlead, but it's in beta. So if you're a Clay power user, check out the beta channel. It's a public beta. You can enable it in your Clay account. We're working with the Clay team on having Outbound Sync also support Clay's Smartlead sequencer to get that data into HubSpot and Salesforce. But you want to, as you scale up, you want to get in the system of record. One of the reasons why is that things like MCP servers. So you can use an MCP server now to talk to your data in HubSpot, particularly if you're using, this is Claude, but ChatGPT yesterday just announced they have an MCP server connector support inside of ChatGPT as well. So if you're doing these actions and you're getting them in your system of record, now what you can do is you can talk to HubSpot and you can say which campaigns are working. What are the results from those? What's driving pipeline? And so you don't have to worry about the RevOps person building you a dashboard or building you a report, even though, sure, we provide those, and maybe your team can build them for you. But what if you just ask HubSpot what's working? You can't do that unless you have a record of it. So this is why the system of record matters. You can go, we've got, I'm actually surprised Austin's not thrown anything at me yet. We work with Sendoso. They've got some big decks that they're working on, they need data for, and we're working on helping tighten that up. This data matters, and the principals in your team are going to want to be able to understand what's going on. And so the better you record it, the more you're going to be able to use AI to extract insight. But you have to think about that from the beginning. I'm going to do a quick blitz call out of 4 pretty awesome companies that are here that I know personally, who I know are doing this stuff at a high level. If you see them, you should talk to them. Fraser is with Mark. He's up there, green hat. He can wave if he wants. We've got Awesome with Sendoso. They're doing really excellent work. Zan with Confetti. I think she just stepped out, but Zan with Confetti. Robert works with them if you're interested in HR recruiting stuff. And then Humble Co. We've got Nate and David. I really recommend speaking to some of the folks here. There's some really great people in this room, and it's a privilege for me to be here, so thank you. I'm going to pass it to Brandon, and we'll chat some more after. Thank you. Woo!
Before Brandon goes, we have a couple options. So shout out to Pete Larkin. The Silicon Slopes team brought crumble cookies, which is amazing. We can either break and do cookies, or we can go through Brandon's demo, and then when it's done, we can eat cookies, hang out, and network. Option 1, raise your hand, which is get cookies now, or option 2, wait, raise your hand. Okay, awesome.
As much time with Brandon as possible.
Yes, the AI wizard is coming. There's so much stuff we could go over, and the tables are endless. I know there's some awesome advertising agencies here as well. There's some really cool stuff within Clay, but man, I wish we could just spend 4 days doing all this stuff. But anyway, you guys have been awesome. We'll let Brandon take over from here.
Let's have Sendoso sponsor a retreat, and we'll just go for 4 days.
I think that's a great idea. I think he just committed. He just
There
said,
we go.
we're doing
Everybody.
it. Everyone in this room is invited.
Casey just gave approval.
Yeah. Quick slap.
All right, so AI, that's a new thing, right? It's all the things. That's like what my feed is all the time. And, you know, I want this to be as open as possible, so please ask the questions. This is cutting edge stuff of things that every one of us is learning. I mean, there's probably going to be a new model launched today, who knows? So the experience I'm doing, obviously I'm working with AI on very heavy usage. Some of the use cases I use it for is not just for like video production, but obviously go to market, and I also work with Instantly. We do a lot of there's another platform called N8N. I won't talk about that much here because it's Clay focused, but I'm happy to answer questions revolving around just triggers and automations and the use of AI agents holistically, because I think it's really important just to be aware of those types of things. Then we'll talk about MCP, and then, because it's obviously very new and a topic, but I'd just like to, first I gotta get on the screen here. I'd like to talk about, percentages. We'll just change since you guys aren't looking at the screen here. Okay, thank you.
You got it, or?
Close.
Awesome.
Nope.
That was it, it was ready.
That's AI.
Oh,
you good?
All right. Yeah. All right. Don't mind my. So Harris did a wonderful presentation. So that was phenomenal. I didn't even know what ET's name is. That's legit. But anyway, so here's my basic canvas here. I'd just like to talk through, and I'd like this to be as open as possible because obviously these things are very new. But my goal here is to share the knowledge that I have. There's probably going to be other experts. I know there are for sure. But I think it's important to discuss the foundations of how AI is evolving, but the foundations of how they actually work, at least at a high level. How to actually talk to these things and to do what you want to do. How to give it the right tools, the anatomy of large language models. And so that way, because I really think when you use Claygent, for example, which is the most powerful feature in Clay, like bar none. It literally just does everything for you if you really wanted to. But the thing around, obviously with Clay, Clay is, in my opinion, the best sprinting tool. You can sprint, you can do a lot of concurrent API calls very quickly in a table fashion, right? So I think it's a great use case for a lot of what we do every single day in terms of go-to-market, like sprinting, right? But then there's going to be more evergreen and long-term workflows where we use other platforms like N8N, things like that. But using a lot of different tools interchangeably, even ChatGPT, I really think you guys can be able to enhance and use Claygent a lot better to get the accurate result. So just to start off, large language model, as we all know it, think of like a person that's in a room with no windows. They could be incarcerated. They have knowledge, but they have no access to the world. They just know 2 + 2, maybe basic college education, whatever, right? If you go into the room and you ask them a question, and they know everything, but they're in the room and they have no connection to the news or anything like that, you don't know the kind of answer you're going to get, right? Because large language models have a cutoff date. So I remember back then, if you even asked like ChatGPT with 3.5, it had a cutoff date. It wouldn't even know like the recent president or something like that. There's context, and it's going to hallucinate. It's going to give you an output. So the biggest thing when you're prompting these models of like, just do this, it could be a simple thing of like, tell me why the sky is blue. Well, it's going to give you an output of why the sky is blue, of what it thinks. But if you ask it that same question, it's going to give you something completely different with no context, right? But if I were to change the role, as I mentioned, you are a college professor, or you're a kindergarten teacher, or your objective here is to talk to Harvard, college grads, things like that, on why the sky is blue, and you give it the task about the science and everything around the parameters, why the sky is blue, and the output needs to be in 10 words or less. It's going to do that for you, and exactly. Versus if you changed it to a kindergarten teacher,
it's going to be a lot different of an output, right? So that's where the control of setting the role of what the AI is, as well as the context around the task. You give it examples of what you want it to say. You also want it to do what you don't want to say, and then control the output. Now, when you send an input into the large language model, it is going to give you an output. So a lot of times with Clay, for example, if you have all this fuzzy data of all these job titles and all these, the unknowns, I mean, I'm sure you guys on LinkedIn get like a, hey, rocket ship police, that's my wife's name. Hey, robot Johnny, I saw this, they pitch you, right? With all their things, and you know they're using automation because they didn't normalize your name. Well, you can use AI to normalize your name, right? It's very standardized. So what I would suggest to do as well is to start, sometimes prompts will take me multiple days, hours, refinements, different large language models. So I like to just call them the consultants, but you have Gemini by Google, you have Grok, which is up and coming, right? You have ChatGPT, obviously, with OpenAI, and then you also have Claude, right? So Claude 4 was just announced, and all of these, their mommies and daddies obviously have training data that they feed into it. So if you feed information into these models and give it the same prompt, your results may vary, and you guys all know that, right? So it's good to test these different models to see what's best. Like I found Claude to actually be really good at creative. That's also great at coding. Copywriting is great. It's very creative, right? And so I wouldn't necessarily use OpenAI's GPT-4o Mini to create the best copy for you, because it's knowing the model for your use case and knowing the parameters. The similar fashion would be if you had a bunch of envelopes and you were doing good old school direct mail, you wouldn't necessarily ask a college professor from Harvard to say, look these envelopes and send them, right? You're asking a very overqualified envelope licker, right? But you could ask like your 5-year-old kid, or what the envelopes or whatever, and do this task. So you think of it like a person with their education background, their age, all that kind of stuff. What type of person would you ask to do this role? If it's something like a teenage kid could do, select a smaller model that's going to be a lot cheaper, a lot faster. If you need something that needs to reason with things and actually give you a really good analysis of what you want, go for the big dogs. Go for Claude Opus or O3, right? A reasoning model, things like that. And so using the right model is really, really important for your use case. And a lot of times, like a lot of us, we'll try to really stretch very small models to do the biggest task, sometimes doing multiple things, like find the location, find this, find that. Whereas if you have a very, very solid prompt that is huge, I mean, just took you all day and you refine the crap out of it, and then it does that one task very, very well. The hit rate is say 99, 100%. When you look at Clay tables, and I'll move this over here. We have, okay, so normalizing first names, for example. We're using basic LLMs. These are not agentic, anything like that, no tools. We're talking very basic stuff. So if I were to do something, and I have this as an example, we have just a few examples here. I'll scroll down. I did this on purpose. But we have Pizza Pete, right? We have, all these emojis, and then we have, just a pickle, we have Hermione, right? Got to throw some Harry Potter in there. We have all these there it is. We have all capitals, right? So your data is going to be all over the place in terms of how you actually insert this into your copy. Why is this important? And to use AI is because you have what you call fuzzy logic, where you just don't know, right? People like to throw things at you and really do a whole lot. So like Dr. Harris Kenny, you wouldn't necessarily, if his first name is input in there, you wouldn't say, hello, doctor, right? You're going to want to call him by his first name. You also have like TJ or Scooter, nicknames. These are fake names, but like a lot of people, or even women's maiden names, right? A lot of these unknowns of what they put on their LinkedIn profile, AI can actually standardize that through context. And then you'll notice here, we save this as a template, and I'm more than happy to share this all with you guys if you guys need it. But basically, I'm saying in Markdown, okay? Because in Markdown, what you're doing is you're emphasizing like H1, H2, H3 tags, basically big bold letters. And a lot of platforms like Notion stuff, you can actually copy and paste in Markdown, and it looks very beautiful. You have all the bullet points, things like that. But it's putting emphasis on the context of your prompt. So if you're just talking out loud and not organizing your prompt, it's going to be all over the place and your results may vary. But for example, I'll just say based on the input name below, output, normalized name, and I gave you all these scenarios. This is the task, okay, and this is the input. And you can see here, this is the system prompt. The system prompt usually defaults to "you're a helpful AI assistant," right? And that's good for a lot of use cases. But in this context, I have sent this through millions and millions of rows, and it hits it every single time. I've refined it so much with all the use cases there. And I just basically, it's standard for us to just normalize the name, no matter how big the table is, because you get 50,000 rows, and that's pretty regular for us. And I need to know that the names are clean, right? Because that's usually the first thing. You can know if you're Rocket Ship Johnny or something like that, right? Question?
Is Markdown similar or the same to prompt chaining? Like, how is that different to like a prompt chain?
Yes and no. So prompt chaining is more of sending it through one step and then moving to the next step to kind of conform it. So it's similar. Markdown is the format of how you can basically put bold and italics, headers, subheaders, bullet points. It helps prioritize. And there's no better source of truth than the makers themselves, which obviously things are always changing. So the makers themselves, I like to just go straight to the source because they're the makers of it. But you'll notice prompt engineering, they talk a lot about when to prompt, how to prompt, and consistently it all comes down to the role, the task, and the output. That's how you control it, especially when you're talking about tokenizations and cost, right? Because if you could just say, give me a list of whatever, give me this, sometimes you don't want the whole page. Sometimes you don't want a paragraph. Sometimes you want to conform it down to like 3 words. Like, why is this person a fit for the role, or is this person, tell me in 5 words or less, versus giving me some elaborative information that you want to standardize, right? Sometimes it's output in JSON, like true or false. Sometimes you want to do first name, So output in JSON, which models are coding experts, right? So if you output in JSON, you can hunker it down that much more, and you can actually standardize a lot of your information. So moving forward, so the other thing I want to touch base on how to talk to LLMs is, like I said, Markdown and then XML tags. Has anybody heard of XML tags? Just no. XML tags is basically a way, and they say it straight from here. It's also in 4.1. XML so Markdown in my opinion is a little bit more readable, right? So this right here is an example of Markdown. You can see this is an H1 with just a hash, and even if you type it in Notion, you'll see real quick, if you just paste this, it's going to populate it. Instruction following, and then going down, it talks about, this is a Markdown file. So it's pretty easy to read, right? XML, things get a little bit crazier, so this is JSON, right? So sometimes, depending on your tech background there. But we talk about XML tags. Basically XML tags looks like, it's just like kind of like HTML. You have the carets of like task or system prompt. So if you were to so much as say, bring up ChatGPT and say, usually, like I said, you can usually talk faster than you can type or write. So it's usually best to communicate through verbal to get your thoughts out. And talk all day. It has a 10-minute cutoff, so you can sit there and think about your thoughts and just talk to a Terminator like my dad says, right? So you can talk to it and then say, again, on the output in a code snippet, because then it's easily copied and paste. Output in a code snippet in Markdown with proper HTML tags, so that way I can insert it into Clay or something like that. It's going to tell you exactly what it is, and then you refine until your prompt is set, right? Store that in a Notion doc or a template, and then you can reuse that asset versus reinvent and every single time. Any questions so far? So XML and Markdown are the huge ones. Yes, sir?
Why do you not include Perplexity?
Perplexity is a good one, but I would say Perplexity, because they have a really good model too. It's really around cost, and especially at scale. It's a pretty expensive model. So obviously with a lot of use cases, 4.1 mini is extreme. Like we run that 4.1 mini for nearly everything just because it's cheap, and we run very large tables often. So we try to keep the tokens down. For research, I'll use Perplexity sometimes for like deep research, or if I need to be connected to the web and understand like a deep research. Like a lot of times when we onboard a client or we're trying to understand who their ICP is, we do a SWOT analysis. We try to capture the market to see pros and cons, what's our market or what's our angle here, get some inspiration. Perplexity is a good one to go to. So what I like to do is I'll use pretty much all of them, Grok, Gemini, DeepSeek, or not DeepSeek, Gemini, ChatGPT, and Claude. Turn on the deep research, let them all do their thing. Takes like a couple minutes, maybe sometimes 15 minutes, depending on your use case. And then I like to aggregate, dedupe, come up with a solid research paper, and you'd be surprised what it comes up with. And then you can turn that into your next step as far as bringing it into Clay to actually come up with copy. So Perplexity is definitely a good one. It's just expensive when you're using it on the API side, that's all. That's your question?
Yeah.
Okay. But Perplexity is definitely a great one. So I would say the best resource, as you know, is just go right to their website. OpenAI, all of them are releasing all these free academies on how to talk to LLMs best. But it really comes down to the role, what are the parameters and the task, and then controlling the output. So, and then Markdown XML, you're going to find that your output is a lot more organized and your results may be more consistent. Next thing we can talk about is the use of agents, right? Or excuse me, large language models with tools. So as I mentioned, your large language model is this Jane or Joe. He's incarcerated, has knowledge, doesn't know anything about the world, right? It's going to hallucinate based on what it knows inside their brain. Well, when you're trying to do like searching or connect to the internet, no different than when you bring up your laptop or your phone, you're like, you know what, I actually don't know the answer to that question. So you bring up your Google search or your calculator on a math problem, anything like that. You're technically using a tool to get your output. This is no different. So when you're asking a large language model like Claygent, and you're saying, go off and research this website, search Google, go to the site, and understand what the company does, who's the target, who's the target job titles, things like that. It's actually going to use the tool to web search and then pull back the information, understand it, because it doesn't want to feed you all the HTML and website information, right? It's going to summarize it, and then it's going to get you information you need to pull in. You can bring that into Clay as context in order to formulate and mold your copy or whatever your output is. And so that's pretty much an LLM plus tools. There's a difference there. When you bring up something like ChatGPT, that's why they have tools. Just turn on web search, and you can know the difference on like what tools, what you would use. So it'd be no different than what you would actually use yourself. So, and then we have agents, which is essentially, I feel like the definition of an agent is a bit ambiguous. Everybody has their own definition. I like to think of agents as somebody that knows their stuff, knows how to figure out a problem, because that's what agency really is. You just figure it out, and then you do the task on that person's behalf. That's really what it is. Is something actually being done? Think of it like when you're talking like your car. You drive here, right? Let's say your check engine light comes on. A basic large language model is you call your mechanic. You're like, yeah man, check engine light's on, or something's wrong with the car. They're going to give you information. Nothing was actually done, right? Large language models with web search or tools, I don't know, let me check on that. Let me look at my manual. Oh, that code, yeah, you need a head gasket or you need new batteries. EVs around there. But they use an external source to give you the right answer, right? They didn't know that immediately. Now an agent is like the mechanic that actually has the manual for reference, like a RAG agent. They're grounded to not give you fluff. And now they have their toolbox. So now they can select tools and can actually do the thing. Like you hear Manus, you hear ChatGPT operator, computer use. I mean, there's all these things nowadays, right? These are great. They're shiny objects. We all get that. I definitely have it. But like for business use cases, it's a bit premature, right? We actually use agents with Instantly. I use agents. I know there's others that use agents in their own workflows. But I think the difference here is using an agent for real business use case is you want to monitor the hallucination and error rate, right? You want to make sure they're consistent because these are like employees. They're going to do the task. Your prompt engineering needs to be sound and dialed in. I'm talking XML and Markdown standard, big time. Output is usually going to be JSON. The other thing that you want to do, I just call it HITL because keep it abbreviated, but human in the loop. So we talked a little bit about HubSpot and like what your next trigger is, your actions, right? I mean, we all use Slack, so I used to like to do a Slack notification. And so some things when you want to analyze agents is you start with a very simple use case, right? So ClayGen obviously is a one-off. What you see is what you get, right? And then when you run it at scale on a Clay table, you get basically one shot. They call it zero-shot prompting. And meaning of that is ChatGPT, you're going to have history. And you're going to have memory. You're going to be able to be like, no, that answer is terrible. Give me another. Give me another. Whatever, right? You can't do that in Clay because you got one shot and it's going to give you what it gives. The memory, there is no memory when you're using Clay. So when you prompt your LLM, whether it's AI or like a large language model as it is with no resources, or something like ClayGen, you want to define everything that you want to do and just use the entire context window as much as you can to get that one output, like solid, right? You'll do you'll analyze your tables, look for anomalies and edge cases and things like that. And depending on good examples and bad examples, you can actually feed that into your prompt, so that way the LLM knows exactly what you want to get, right? So that's how AI agents, I would suggest, we're going to get more into it, but basically what I like to think of AI agents is things that actually are getting done, right? That's what I would call an agent. And obviously it's ever evolving now. There's systems and people, I like to call it that. But AI agents, I mean, they can do some work. In fact, with Instantly, just over the last 7 days, we had around 11,000 executions across departments. And we had about 324 hours, because we did a benchmark basically of if one workflow takes you 1 minute, we can all agree that 60 executions saves you an hour, right? Well, if a human does it, let's call it 2 to 5 minutes, or if you're actually researching a person, this is where automation really saves, and not only that, but it scales your time. And so with that, I mean, 324 hours divided by 40, that's roughly 8 employees, right? So we're like, wow, that's pretty solid, right? When you're using agents, stuff like that. Well, Clay is no different because what you're doing is you're actually creating time. You use an agent to do research for you. So you literally just want to brain dump everything in context you know about your business, your client, your ICP, what the actual objective is, and then segment that down either to 1 or 2 or 4 agents, depending on the steps, whether it's job title, location, any sort of output without getting skewed. Select the right use case for that, the right model. So any questions there? I'll stop there. Questions? All right, so moving forward, MCP. Has anybody not heard of MCP before? MCP?
No.
Okay. MCP is a very new thing. This is kind of aside from Clay. I'd like to do a quick thing with, aside from MCP. So when you're bringing up ClayGen, I'm kind of hopping around here, I apologize. But with ClayGen, this is just an example right here. I basically said I want to craft an agent where I summarize based on the company name. This is just a very basic thing. And then what it's doing is I'm enhancing the prompt, right? So you can see this is Markdown. It's going through. This is kind of where it's easier just for you to be able to systematize. But I would save this as a template. There's a beautiful thing here where you can save and not have to recreate the wheel every time. But then if you hit generate prompt, and you can come up with JSON here. And then once you actually bring it up, it will output this in JSON, and then you will see the steps here and decision maker job title. So that is pretty much it right there, where it'll populate and you can add the column and take next steps. So that's just an example of being able to output structured JSON for what your use case is. The one last thing I'll say too around this is model selection. So if you drop down here, you can see all of these, and then Clay credits, and that kind of like I was talking about. You wouldn't necessarily want to use something like, Clay operator, but it's actually new, or 3.7 Sonnet for every task just to normalize first names, right? That would be a bad choice in my opinion, right? So if you're doing something like normalizing first names or doing very basic things where I could ask like a 10-year-old to do it, you maybe want to select 4.1 mini. 4.0 mini is still actually not bad, but 4.1 mini is good. That's really cheap. But I would say go to the websites, understand what it costs for input and output tokens. They usually rate it per million tokens. And you can usually quantify if it makes sense for you to use Clay credits or just get your own token. So just find that balance. That way when you're running these automations and at scale, that you're going to see your token consumption pretty quickly versus using the whole Clay credit for what you're using it for. So any questions on that? Yes, sir.
You skipped over the one that was 0.5, the nano. Is it just really bad?
Nano, 4.1 nano, 4.1 nano, 4.1 mini. Nano is a new one. That one is for like, I would say, I have an 8 and a 10-year-old. I would probably have my 8-year-old do it. My 10-year-old's pretty, well, they're both smart, but my 10-year-old, she's a 4.1 mini. So, yeah, it's a little bit small.
What's the cost on that one? I guess context, like you have to read the response there.
Oh yeah,
so
this is great.
Because part of it is like side by side cloning, compare the cost, like
Right there.
Yeah.
So you can see exactly what your cost is to the provider when you're using your own API keys. So you can analyze that, and I could even bring this as a column, so I can see across my whole table what are my token costs. And if I know, I mean, if you're on a plan and each credit is like 1 cent, 1.5 cents, I mean, you can see the cost benefit there, right? Use your own API keys for depending on what you're doing. So that might be, and then the other thing that is really good about these AI models, or these makers, is they have a playground. Definitely encourage you guys to check out their playgrounds, because it's usually free. You can experiment with your prompts, you can throw things at it, and then once you create a good prompt, I mean, prompts are assets nowadays. Like you want to save those in your Notion and Clay and reuse those because they can be tweaked, they can be optimized, you can share them across your teams to know that you have a repeat scenario here, so you're not always recreating the same things, right? So I would say make prompts your asset versus always having to say, I want to do this, and then do that, and then you never save it, right? Because then when you run a bunch of tables, you just can get it lost and pretty quickly there. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Nano's great. I'd say 8-year-old level if I had to put that there. All right. Now, MCP. MCP is a big thing, and it's very new, obviously. It's ever evolving. Let's see what my screen's here. So MCP, for example, I think Claude, I mean, they're the ones, Anthropic is the ones that created it, so.
Drag it out.
Okay, I'll touch lightly on MCP. It is definitely a hot topic. So MCP is what I like to think of it as the next API, the REST API. API, as you know, with Clay, we're doing API calls. We're sending one action. You're either going to push information or pull information. That's pretty much what Clay is you're taking all the data, or what data you have, and you're finding these different information area, and you're doing these steps to either push information somewhere or pull information, right? If you have structured data, you usually take and run with it, like job title, first name, all that kind of stuff. And then there's going to be areas of enrichment, like finding an email address. These are very, in my opinion, very simple API calls, right? MCP basically wraps a large language model around it to understand how to actually use that tool. And when you're talking about API calls, you usually do what you call a JSON payload, such as you're providing the payload, the data, to that server to pull the information back. So MCP is, if I had to put it in everyday terms, is like a toolbox of your wrench, your hammer, your all these things. Your AI agent, your mechanic, can look in the toolbox and be like, here's a 3/4 wrench, this is how you use a 3/4 wrench, and I'm gonna do this, versus like hard-coded stuff. And so the reason why I think MCP is so big, in my opinion, I think we're kind of going full circle back to the simple ways of chat windows, where you go to a chat, like Slack or OpenAI, things like that. And I actually have all these options to say, like what Hair's talking about. What are my campaigns? What are the limits here? What do I want to do? And it's going to be able to use all of their MCP servers, or the MCP servers that you have available, to actually do that task. So in a sense, it's kind of doing what a lot what Clay is doing, except it's a little bit more automated. So you just gotta try to figure out, okay, what steps is it taking? So that's where prompt comes in, right? You're gonna say, the role, this is the context, check this, check that, check this, and give me the information, right? MCP is obviously really, really up and coming. I could talk about it a lot more than when it comes to A to A, but those are some experimental things that I would talk about when it comes to MCP. It is, I mean, it's literally coming out like crazy right now. There's MCPs everywhere. I would just say this when it comes to MCP, because there are concerns around it. Security, right? It's a big thing when it comes to security and your data, right? So I would just say, there's a lot of third-party MCPs out there, so HubSpot just released their official one. I would say that's pretty trustworthy, right? So when you're installing an MCP server, whether it's GitHub or all these MCP hosts, try to really just know like the maker and understand a lot of the stuff is open source. So try to reason with it. I would even throw it into ChatGPT and reason with it to say like, hey, is this trustworthy? Are there any concerns, things like that, when you're actually considering using an MCP server. So these ones I know like work. We're actually developing instantly MCP as well. But you can essentially launch a campaign, you can understand things, you can do deep research, and then do the next step. So there's a lot of benefits to using MCP. That's kind of where it's going. But I would say with regards to Clay, Clay is one of those, like I said, sprint tools, in my opinion, where you can do the thing for what you want to do as far as being like a Photoshop of data, more or less. And then you can punch that into something like Claude. You can even design your own AI agents, which is a whole other topic. Where it actually uses MCP to actually decide what it wants to do, to find an email, to send the email, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, I'll pause there. It's a lot of information, but any thoughts, any tips, any additional things? I mean, this is, like I said, I want to be as open as possible. This is definitely cutting edge stuff, but that's some of the things that I've learned. I guess the takeaway here is know what your spend is for input and output per million tokens. Use the cookbooks directly from the vendors themselves, because this stuff is new. What I'm saying could be outdated tomorrow, right? And then analyze your costs and know how to actually integrate your APIs, because sometimes it's not worth the Clay credit just to normalize names, right? So I'll stop there. Any questions? I don't, and by the way, ET's name, like, you got me, dude. Yeah. So, yes?
What's the most effective MCP?
Most effective MCP? Firecrawl.
What?
Firecrawl, for sure. There is a service that we use every day. As far as most effective, most used one, there's two actually. Claude just released, well, it's actually a few months ago, they released the Think tool. The Think tool allows the model, instead of giving you a response, it actually pauses. It has about another round of tokenizing before it gives you results. And you can use this to other LLMs too. It's a Think tool, look it up. And then Anthropic released it, Think tool. The other one is Firecrawl. Firecrawl, when you're exploring with tools with Clay and all these things of the world of data, the more you know about web scraping, the better off you'll be across the board. And all you need to do is hit Command F12 or right click and go to DevTools in your Chrome browser, and you'll be surprised at what data you find that was on the site versus what's under the hood. And if you can start to understand like JSON a little bit, just enough to be dangerous, you can start to see some of the, connect the dots. And when you use something like Firecrawl, I guess I should explain what Firecrawl is. It is LLMs with web scraping. And you could literally say, like in Claude or ChatGPT, like what does this website do? I mean, it literally goes to the site, it will scrape it, which essentially downloads all of the HTML, CSS, that kind of thing. And the complexities around websites, obviously, there's like JavaScript and React and all this other stuff, right? So a lot of websites, you just don't know what you're getting at. But when you go to the site, you see it, now the LLM can scrape, return the response, versus the standard like, oh, let me just search Google and let me give you a summary. It actually scrapes the website and will actually give you the results. And it's really powerful, I think, because it summarizes it. Firecrawl has agentic ways where you can even through API send the information on the website, use it, and you can use it in Clay, and it'll do pretty some powerful stuff. But like ClayGen, I'd say it's a good, beefier ClayGen if I had to summarize it. So, that's your question? Firecrawl, I'd look it up. Firecrawl.dev, they're great. Any other questions?
think we're good. Robert's gonna close this up. I just have two quick 2-second things. That job change table, I've spent $13 on that in like 8 months. So just to get an idea of like how much that costs. Now it's tracking about 500 people for a small company, but I mean, that cost is negligible. And again, when you're testing, like I never even knew, I never even checked, I don't care. If a customer we have change jobs, I wanna know, and if you're testing in a small number, it's okay to be a little wasteful. I think that's my opinion. Brandon's talking about tokens at millions of token scale, so it's like a totally different ball of wax. And then that's fire crawl, not fireball, not the Pitbull song.
No.
Fire
Not the
crawl.
whiskey, not the whiskey either.
With a C. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Robert, close us out.
One other thing I want to mention too, sorry, I forgot to mention it, because it was a recent release, but for some reason Grok is not yet implemented into Clay. And I would just say, I would look at Grok because obviously it has ties with Twitter. There's good data there. And they just recently connected their API to X database and web search. That's powerful, I think, because there could be some data on X, which obviously is crowdsourced. So it might be worth looking at their API, getting that into Clay, which that's a whole other conversation. But you basically can connect Grok to Clay. I demoed it too, but you can probably source information from X, pull it into your Clay table, and probably use that. So just a additional thing. And it's cheap. Grok 3 Mini is the cheapest reasoning model, even beats DeepSeek, like reliable. It's good stuff. So anyway.
It's awesome. Give Brandon a round of applause. I actually didn't know that, so that is awesome. Okay, well that's Clay Club Utah. We're gonna try to be doing these like once a month. I mean, the biggest thing I just want you guys to take away is don't always just think that Clay is outbound motions. It's much more. But I think a lot of times when people evaluate Clay, they get really afraid because they think there has to be all these special enrichments and processes. But if you look at the capabilities, you can see from a RevOps perspective, a marketing perspective, it can apply to everything you're doing. And so, yeah, we're gonna hang out, have some cookies. Thanks again, Silicon Slopes. And if you guys have like specific questions, you want us to like look at a Clay table with you, like we'll hang out, network and stuff. But thank you again for coming. This was super fun.